The morning started like any other. I woke up to the sound of the alarm, turned around and found the bed empty next to me. David had already left for work. I got up, made the bed and went down to the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh coffee greeted me. It was an ordinary day, or so I thought. While drinking my coffee, my cell phone vibrated on the table. A message from Sarah, my best friend, wishing me a good day and asking if we could meet up at the weekend. I responded with a smile and continued with my routine. However, something was nagging at the back of my mind, a strange feeling that I couldn't identify. David had been distant lately, always busy with work, coming home late and leaving early. I decided not to make a big deal of it, believing it was just another stressful time at his law firm. While cleaning the house, I saw David's cell phone forgotten on the couch. He never forgot his cell phone. I picked up the device and, without thinking much, unlocked the screen. A flood of unread messages appeared, most of them from a number I recognized immediately. Emily, my sister. My heart sped up, and a feeling of nausea came over me. I opened the first message and read, "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again." My hands shook as I continued to read the following messages, all filled with intimacy and secrets. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. How could this be happening? Emily, the person I trusted most, the sister I shared my entire life with, was betraying my trust in the cruelest way. And David, the man who promised to love and protect me, was in on it. The pain was unbearable. When David got home that night, I was waiting for him in the living room. He walked in, unconcerned, until he saw my expression. "Annie, what happened?" he asked, trying to hide the concern in his voice. "I know, David. I saw the messages," I replied, my voice cracking. He turned pale. "Annie, I can explain," he began, but I interrupted him. "Explain what? That you're cheating on me with my own sister? That all those nights you said you were working late, you were with her? I don't want to hear your excuses. I want the truth." David sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Yes, I was with Emily. We got too close. I'm sorry, Annie." "Are you sorry? Is that all you have to say? You destroyed our life, our family. And Emily? How could she do this to me?" David avoided my eyes. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to stay with Emily." Those words were like a knife in my heart. "So, that's it? You're going to leave me for her? You're going to abandon everything we've built together?" He did not answer. He just grabbed his things and left, leaving me alone in the room, devastated. That night I called Sarah. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me understand what was happening. When she answered, I couldn't hold back the tears. "Sarah, he cheated on me. With Emily," I sobbed. "Annie, my God, I'm on my way," she replied, without hesitation. When Sarah arrived, she wrapped me in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry, Annie. I don't know what to say. But you're not alone. We'll get through this together." We sat on the couch, and I told her everything. Every detail, every message, every word from David. Sarah listened patiently, offering me comfort and advice. "Annie, you are strong. You will get through this. I know it seems impossible right now, but one day you will look back and see that this pain made you stronger. David and Emily made a terrible choice, but you can't let that it defines your life." I wanted to believe her words, but the pain was overwhelming. However, Sarah's presence gave me a small ray of hope. I knew that, somehow, I would survive this betrayal, and in time, maybe I would find a way to move forward. The sound of David's car engine pulling away echoed in my mind like the closing of a painful chapter. The house, now empty, seemed to swallow my sadness. I knew I needed to move on, but the wound was still open and bleeding. That day, I decided it was time to face reality, no matter how painful it was. A few weeks have passed since the devastating discovery. I tried to focus on work and small daily tasks, but the shadow of betrayal continued to hang over me. It was then that, on a rainy afternoon, I received an unexpected message from Emily, asking us to meet. My heart sank. I didn't know if I was ready to face my sister, but something inside me compelled me to go. When I arrived at the cafe, I was shocked to see her. Emily was pale, with sunken eyes and an air of extreme tiredness. "Annie," she murmured, trying to force a smile. Thanks for coming. Emily, what's going on? Are you okay? I asked, unable to hide my concern. She sighed deeply, looking away. I don't know, Annie. I've been feeling so tired lately, and I've been losing weight. David, well, he hasn't been very understanding. The mention of him made my stomach turn. You need to see a doctor, Emily. This doesn't seem normal. She hesitated, but eventually agreed. The following week, I managed to convince her to make a doctor's appointment. The wait for the results was agonizing. Every minute felt like an eternity, and I found myself silently praying that it was just a scare. Finally, the day arrived. We went to the office together, and the doctor's serious expression as he entered the room made me catch my breath. Emily, your tests revealed something concerning, he began. You have a malignant tumor. It's cancer. The world stopped for a moment. Emily broke down in tears, her body shaking with fear and despair. I held her, trying to be strong, but feeling my own heart shatter. No, it can't be, she whimpered, her voice barely audible. Emily, I whispered, trying to calm her. We'll face this together. I'm here with you. She looked at me, her eyes full of guilt and pain. Annie, forgive me for everything. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words were a blow to my already wounded heart. Emily, now is not the time for that. Let's focus on your recovery, okay? We can figure out the rest later. Over the next few days, I started organizing everything for Emily's treatment. Between appointments, exams, and preparations for chemotherapy, our home became a point of support and hope. David, as expected, was increasingly distant, almost absent. His situation with Emily seemed to have become too much of a burden for him to carry. One night, as I was helping Emily get ready for bed, she held my hand tightly. Annie, I don't know what I would do without you. You're the only good thing I have left. Those words touched me deeply. The betrayal still hurt, but seeing my sister so vulnerable and dependent on me awakened a feeling of protection I didn't know I still had. We'll get through this, Emily. Together, one step at a time. And so, the healing journey began, not only for Emily, but for me as well. The pain and betrayal were far from overcome, but a new purpose was emerging. To save my sister, care for her, and perhaps find the strength to rebuild myself in the process. I still remember the overwhelming feeling when the doctor told us the news. Cancer, he said, and it was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Emily was there, fragile and helpless, and all I wanted to do was hug her and tell her everything was going to be okay. But how could I promise that? My sister, who had betrayed my trust, was now trapped in a battle for her life. And David, the one who should have been by her side, by our side, was more distant than ever. David didn't take long to show his true colors. As soon as he learned the severity of Emily's situation, he practically disappeared. I found him in the living room, packing his things. David, what are you doing? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. He didn't even look up to look at me. I can't deal with this, Annie, he said, with a coldness that chilled my blood. I have a career, a life. This is too much for me. How can you be so insensitive? I screamed, feeling anger and despair mix inside me. She is your lover, your responsibility. He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was pure indifference. She's your sister, Annie. Take care of her. And with that, David walked out the door, leaving us alone to face the nightmare that was to come. Emily, who was lying in the next room, heard everything. When I entered the room, she was crying. He left me, Annie, she said between sobs. I'm sorry for everything. I was an idiot. Please forgive me. My first reaction was anger. How could she ask for forgiveness after everything? But as I looked at her, so vulnerable and broken, something inside me changed. It wasn't just my sister there, but a terrified, sick person begging for help. Emily, I began, sitting down next to her and holding her hand. I will not lie. I'm hurt. I'm furious. But you are my sister, and I will not abandon you. She cried even more, and I hugged her, feeling a mixture of compassion and sadness. I knew the road ahead would be arduous, but I couldn't turn my back on it. The following days were a whirlwind. I had to balance my work with Emily's doctor's appointments. Each hospital visit was a constant reminder of our new reality. Emily was weak, and each chemotherapy session seemed to sap even more of her energy. But I was determined to be by his side, even if it meant facing my own pain and resentment. One night, as we sat in the living room, Emily looked at me with tired eyes. "Annie, I know I caused you a lot of pain. If I could go back in time, I would do everything differently," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Don't think about that now, Emily," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The important thing is that you improve. The rest, we'll sort it out later." She nodded, and I realized that despite everything, there was still a chance to rebuild our relationship. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to try. David, on the other hand, was increasingly absent. I got a message from him a few weeks later saying he had found a new apartment and was getting on with his life. I did not answer. The man I thought I knew had turned out to be a stranger, someone unable to deal with the consequences of his actions. As I cared for Emily, I realized that David's betrayal had left a deep scar on me. But at the same time, this experience was teaching me about resilience, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. Every day was a struggle, but every small victory, like a smile from Emily or good news from the doctor, gave me the strength to keep going. And so, we continue, one day at a time, rebuilding our lives from the broken pieces. Taking care of Emily has become my life mission. At first, every hospital visit was emotional torture. The sterile air and smell of disinfectant made me feel like I was suffocating in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. However, every time I looked at Emily, weak and fragile, my determination was renewed. I took her to medical appointments and chemotherapy sessions, always with a smile on my face, even if my heart was in pieces. One afternoon, as we waited at the office for another chemotherapy session, Emily held my hand tightly. "Annie, I don't know how to thank you for this. I don't deserve your kindness after everything I've done," she said, tears streaming down her pale face. I swallowed hard, trying to hold back my own tears. "Emily, the past is the past. Now what matters is helping you stay well. We are family, and family takes care of each other." On the hardest days, when her pain seemed unbearable, I remembered the happy moments of our childhood. There was one afternoon in particular that always brought a smile to my face. "Do you remember that summer we went to the lake with Dad?" I asked once, as I held a cold compress to his forehead. Emily closed her eyes and smiled slightly. "How can I forget? You threw a dragonfly at me and I ran away, screaming like crazy. We laughed together, and for a moment, all the pain and betrayal seemed far away." Sarah, my best friend, was also by my side during this time. She brought me ready-made meals, helped with the housework, and most importantly, offered her shoulder for me to cry on. "Annie, you are a force of nature. I don't know how you can do all this," she said, admiringly. I would just smile and say, "I don't know if I'm strong, Sarah. I just know I need to do this." It was Sarah who brought the news that shook my foundations even more. We were in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when she casually commented, "Did you hear about the scandal in David's office?" My automatic response was a negative shake of my head. "It looks like he's involved in some kind of corruption. It's all over the papers." My heart raced, and I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. Anger at what he had done to me and Emily, and satisfaction at finally seeing his mask fall. While Emily was fighting cancer, I was fighting my own demons. Each day was a battle to maintain my composure, to not let the hate eat away at what was left of my sanity. But seeing Emily, even in her fragility, trying to be strong, gave me strength. One night, as he helped her lie down, she whispered, "Annie, you don't have to do this. I know I hurt you deeply." I held his hands and looked directly into his eyes. "Emily, I chose to be here because I love you. What happened between you and David doesn't change that." Little by little, our bond began to strengthen again. We shared laughter and tears, stories and comfortable silences. There were times when we would just sit together, not saying a word, just enjoying each other's company. The pain of betrayal was still there, but slowly, love and compassion began to heal the wounds. Each chemotherapy session was a new challenge, but also a new hope. I accompanied Emily every step of the way, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement. And through it all, I began to realize that I was also healing. I was rediscovering my own strength and resilience. Despite everything, life went on, and I continued to fight, not just for Emily, but for myself. Because at the end of the day, the true journey of recovery was not just hers, but ours. Together, we were learning to forgive, to love, and to live again. I woke up that morning with a strange feeling, as if something terrible was about to happen. Emily's tired expression haunted me more than usual. She was in a critical phase of treatment, and it seemed like the disease was winning. The weight of responsibility on my shoulders was overwhelming, but I knew I needed to be strong for her. Annie, Emily's voice sounded weak and hesitant. I don't think I can do it. I felt a lump in my throat, but I forced a smile. Don't say that, Emily. You're stronger than you think. We'll get through this together. She looked at me with teary eyes, and for a moment, I saw the little sister I always wanted to protect. I wanted to believe that, she murmured, looking away. That night, after many days of fighting, Emily suffered a severe relapse. His fever spiked, and I realized the situation was critical. I rushed her to the hospital, my heart beating in my chest like an out-of-control drum. For hours, I waited outside the ICU, anguish consuming me inside. Finally, a doctor approached and, before he said anything, I saw the gravity on his face. She's stable for now, he said, but the uncertainty in his voice left me desperate. We're going to do everything we can. As I waited, I was overcome with a mix of emotions. The fear of losing Emily and the anger at everything that had happened in the last few months. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Emily, still weak, asked to speak to me. Annie, she began, voice just a whisper. I need to tell you something. I sat next to her, holding her cold hand. What's wrong, Emily? She paused, breathing hard. David manipulated me, she confessed. He knew exactly how to convince me, how to play with my emotions. I was vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. The revelation hit me like a punch in the gut. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared, she replied, tears streaming down her face. Scared of losing you for good. I felt so guilty, and I still do. Emily, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, you were just as much a victim as I was. We can't let him continue to destroy us. The next day, Sarah came to visit me. She knew something was up and brought with her a folder full of documents. Annie, I think you need to see this, she said, opening the folder. I looked at the documents and suddenly everything made sense. David was involved in a corruption scandal at work, and this evidence could destroy him. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for, I murmured, feeling a spark of hope light up inside me. Yes, Sarah agreed, but you need to be prepared for what comes next. It's going to be an uphill battle. I knew she was right. Exposing David meant facing more pain and suffering, but it was also the chance for justice, not just for me, but for Emily and all the other lives he had destroyed. I looked at my sister, still fighting for her life, and I knew I couldn't give up. Let's do this, I told Sarah, with renewed determination. For Emily. For all of us. As Sarah and I began to plan our next steps, I felt a strength building within me. David's betrayal, Emily's illness, all of it had transformed me, made me stronger. I was no longer the broken woman he left behind. I was a survivor, and now I was ready to fight for justice. Emily, still fragile, looked at me with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Thank you, Annie, she whispered, for not giving up on me. I held his hand tightly. We're in this together, sister. Always have been and always will be. And so, in that moment of crisis, I found the strength to move forward. It wasn't just about revenge, but about redemption, about finding a new way of living, and, perhaps, about finally finding the peace we so desperately sought. I still remember the day I decided I wouldn't let David get away with it. His betrayal with Emily would be reason enough to destroy me, but abandoning her when she needed it most was the last straw. I knew he had to pay for his actions, both in our personal lives and in his professional career. Sarah was my confidant and partner on this journey. With your help, we spent sleepless nights gathering all the evidence we had against him. Emails, text messages, financial documents, anything that could be used to unmask him. One night, as we were surrounded by stacks of paper and digital files, Sarah looked at me with a serious expression. "Annie, are you ready to do this? He's going to try to destroy you too," she said, concern evident in her voice. I took a deep breath and replied, "I have no choice, Sarah. He destroyed our lives. Now it's his turn to face the consequences." With everything ready, we went to the police. We presented all of our evidence and, to my surprise, the investigators immediately took the case seriously. They found enough evidence to launch a formal investigation into David's corruption. I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as I left the police station. It was the beginning of the end for David, but also the beginning of a new chapter for me. Meanwhile, Emily was struggling with her relapse. Every day was a battle, and I dedicated myself to being by his side at every appointment and chemotherapy session. There were times when I thought she wouldn't make it, but my sister was stronger than I imagined. On one of those difficult days, while we were in the hospital, Emily held my hand and said, "Annie, I don't know how to thank you for not giving up on me. I know I hurt you deeply, but you're still here, looking out for me. That means the world to me." I felt a lump in my throat and, with tears in my eyes, I replied, "You're my sister, Emily. Nothing will change that. We'll get through this together." Over time, Emily began to show signs of recovery. It was as if every little victory of hers was also a victory of mine. Seeing your strength and determination gave me courage to continue my fight for justice. David's trial day was one of the most tense of my life. The courtroom was packed, and the media was out in force to cover the case. When David entered the room, he tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The prosecution presented all the evidence we had gathered, and I was called to testify. When I took the witness stand, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. I looked directly at David and told him everything he had done: the betrayal, the abandonment of Emily, the corruption at work. David tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the verdict was announced, he was found guilty for his professional and personal actions. It was a moment of justice that I will never forget. I felt a sense of inner peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. After the trial, Emily and I returned home, where Sarah was waiting for us with a bottle of wine to celebrate. We were starting to leave everything behind when I received an anonymous letter. I opened it cautiously, and the revelation inside left me speechless. Not only had David cheated on Emily, but he was also involved with another woman who was now willing to testify against him in a large-scale financial fraud case. It was the final test that would definitively seal his fate. With this new information, we handed everything over to the police, ensuring that David would face all the consequences of his actions. Now, with Emily recovering and David paying for his crimes, I feel like I can finally breathe. Betrayal and pain changed me, but they also made me stronger. I found a new purpose in helping other women overcome betrayal and injustice. Life may have tested me in unimaginable ways, but I have proven that even in the worst situations, it is possible to find redemption and justice.